everyone, good morning, and you are now watching a special See Today live event, the official visit of the new Australian Prime Minister, the Honourable Mr. Anthony Albanese, to the Republic of Indonesia.
That's right, the opening ceremony takes place at the Bogor Presidential Palace, where President Joko Widodo and Prime Minister Anthony Albanese will hold some state agendas, including veranda talks and joint press conferences at the end of today's agenda. I'm Kai Surya.
And I'm Paul Palelli. Let's begin the official visit event of the Australian Prime Minister, the Honourable Mr. Anthony Albanese, to Indonesia.
Anthony Norman Albanese, otherwise known as Albo, is an Australian politician who is currently served as the 31st Prime Minister of Australia after the party he led, the Labour Party, won the first general election in 9 years. The Labour Party won a narrow 76 votes out of 151 seats in Parliament. Albanese has led the Labour Party since 2019 when he succeeded Bill Shorten. During his leadership, Albanese focused on climate change issues, affordable childcare, and government-assisted health services expansion.
Together we can be a self-reliant, resilient nation, confident in our values and in our place in the world. And together we can embrace the Uluru Statement from the Heart. We can answer its patient, gracious call for a voice enshrined in our Constitution. Because all of us ought to be proud that amongst our great multicultural society, we count the oldest living continuous culture in the world.
Albo planned to visit Indonesia for his first state visit after attending the Quad meeting in Japan. It becomes conventional for Australian newly elected leaders to visit Indonesia in their first state visit. The Indonesian Foreign Affairs Ministry stated that Albanese's visit underlines strategic partnership between the two countries.
Nah, dalam pertemuan tersebut diharapkan kedua pemimpin berfokus pada upaya penguatan kemitraan ekonomi di antara kedua negara, terutama dalam rangka upaya percepatan pemulihan ekonomi, pemulihan secara umum pasca pandemi. Terdapat juga kemungkinan bahwa kedua pemimpin akan mengangkat isu-isu yang menjadi perhatian bersama di tingkat regional ataupun tingkat global.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and his cabinet members are scheduled to visit Jakarta on Sunday, June the 5th to the 7th. Dian Merdekawati and Nugo Raharjo for See Today.
Well, this certainly looks like a very interesting day because after 9 years, right, it looks like a new dawn for Australia, and they have been working very, very hard to make sure the international community feels that new liveliness that Australia is going through right now.
Absolutely, and you know, after 2 years of pandemic, we do know that travel was very restricted in those first 2 years. I have a friend who has family in Australia as well. They weren't even able to see each other over the past 2 years, but obviously all that has changed now, and especially with a new Prime Minister in place with this being his first bilateral visit. Not only that, it's the first country that he's been visiting since he's taking his new place as Prime Minister.
Yeah, I mean, this just shows just how important Indonesia is and its relationship to Australia. And in a statement before he left Australia, Prime Minister also said that it is time we recognize Indonesia beyond just Jakarta and Bali. So that's why he's actually making a visit to Makassar as well, if I'm not mistaken. So when we think about kangaroos and koalas, of course, we often would immediately think of where these exotic animals are endemic or come from. Yes, that's right, Australia.
That's right, and apart from that, there are so many unique things about the land down under, which we have compiled for you in the following coverage. Let's have a look.
Australia, which is a British Commonwealth country, is also the world's smallest continent. Its location in the southern hemisphere makes it geographically close to the South Pole. Australia is also the 6th largest country in the world with a large indigenous population. Being both a continent and a country, Australia has a number of unique facts that you must know. According to 2016 The Daily News article, There are around 44 million kangaroos in Australia, or twice the country's population. Thus, it should come to no surprise, the land is known as the Kangaroo Country.
All right, so we're now going to connect with the Bogor
Yes.
Presidential Palace, where the event is actually taking place. Let's go to it right now.
Resmi selesai, nantinya akan dilanjutkan dengan sesi foto bersama dan juga penandatanganan buku tamu di ruang teratai Istana Kepresidenan Bogor. Dan setelahnya, kedua pemimpin akan melaksanakan penanaman pohon bersama di halaman belakang Istana Kepresidenan Bogor. Lalu setelah itu juga akan ada pelaksanaan pertemuan tatap muka atau tete-a-tete di Resto Rasa Kebun Raya Bogor. Usai melaksanakan pertemuan tatap muka, kedua pemimpin negara beserta masing-masing delegasi dari kedua negara akan melaksanakan pertemuan bilateral yang dilaksanakan di Istana Kepresidenan Bogor, dan setelahnya kita akan saksikan juga pernyataan pers bersama antar kedua pemimpin negara. Dan rangkaian acara penyambutan resmi hari ini akan ditutup dengan jamuan santap siang kenegaraan. Ini merupakan kunjungan pertama dari Perdana Menteri Australia semenjak dilantik menjadi Perdana Menteri pada bulan Mei 2022, yang dimana sebelumnya Perdana Menteri Australia juga pernah mengunjungi negara Jepang, tetapi di dalam konteks kerjasama dalam pertemuan diskusi Quad. Dan saat ini, hari ini Perdana Menteri Australia yang tiba di Istana Kepresidenan Bogor akan melaksanakan pertemuan bilateral dan merupakan kunjungan resmi pertamanya semenjak menjabat menjadi Perdana Menteri.
And we're just hearing the rundown of today's event. In the meantime, some of the member of delegations and attendees that will be attending is, of course, the Honorable His Excellency Joko Widodo, the President of the Republic of Indonesia, along with His Excellency Luhut Binsar Panjaitan as Coordinating Minister for Maritime and Investment Affairs.
Yes, and of course, Her Excellency Ibu Retno Marsudi, Minister for Foreign Affairs, will also be there, and His Excellency Pak Pratikno, Minister for State Secretariat, His Excellency Agus Gumiwang Kartasasmita as Minister for Industry, and His Excellency Muhammad Lutfi, Minister for Trade, of course, will also be there. His Excellency Siso Pramono, Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to Australia, and Mr. Paul Takraja Mangatur Simbolon, interpreter for the President of the Republic of Indonesia, Australia, the honor also of obviously those were the Indonesian parties.
That's right. And from Australia, the Honorable Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister of Australia, the Honorable Penny Wong, Minister for Foreign Affairs, the Honorable Don Farrell, Minister for Trade and Tourism, and the Honorable Ed Husick as Minister of Industry and Science, along with Mr. Luke Gosling Oam, the member for Solomon, Ms. Penny Williams, the PSM Ambassador to Indonesia, Ms. Kathy Klugman, Senior Advisor for the Office of the Prime Minister, Ms. Katrina Cooper, Deputy Secretary for the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and last but certainly not least, Mr. Roderick Razier, the First Assistant Secretary in International Division for the Department of the Prime Minister.
Yeah, now of course, like a big state visit like this one will require a lot of preparation. So the Foreign Minister, Her Excellency Ms. Penny Wong, has arrived last week to coordinate the Prime Minister's first visit here to Jakarta with Ibu Retno Marsudi, which was very documented and very interesting to see two women in power.
Absolutely.
Setting things here in Indonesia. And of course, as you can see in the footage, the Prime Minister and his delegation is arriving at the Bogor Palace in Bogor.
And right on time, as the official welcoming ceremony is set to take place, followed by a quick photo session along with a guest book signing. And from there, they will be heading for the veranda transit, along with the tree planting ceremony. From there, they will be departing for their next location.
Yes. Now, the official welcoming ceremony takes place at the courtyard of the Bogor Presidential Palace. And as we can see, the Prime Minister of Australia is being served by a full party. You can see the drum band, you can see the horses right there.
And great to have nice weather out there.
Yes, I was just going to say, beautiful day.
You know that the air in Bogor is always so wonderful anyway, so great to see that the sun is out.
Yes. What a festive welcome party. As we wait for the Prime Minister to finally arrive.
And making his way to the front of the presidential palace is the Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese, and waiting to be greeted by our President, President Joko Widodo of the Republic of Indonesia.
Welcomed by live Balinese gamelan. There you have
Beautiful.
it. Yes.
Perdana Menteri Anthony Albanese telah tiba dan disambut langsung oleh Presiden Joko Widodo yang kemudian sesaat lagi kita akan saksikan upacara penyambutan resmi di halaman Istana Kepresidenan Bogor.
Well, as we can see, the Prime Minister of Australia is welcomed by the President of the Republic of Indonesia, and the Chief of State Protocol of the Republic of Indonesia then invites the Prime Minister of Australia and the President of the Republic of Indonesia to proceed to the saluting days.
Correct, Guy. There will be a procession following this, which we will now witness. The Guards of Honor will now be playing the national anthem of Australia. A beautiful rendition of the Australian national anthem, which will be followed by Indonesia Raya.
While the national anthems were being played,
Lapor upacara siap dimulai. Selanjutnya pasukan siap diperiksa.
The Prime Minister of Australia will now be accompanied by the President, Joko Widodo, and escorted by the commander of the ceremony to descend from the saluting dais and walk along the red carpet in order to inspect the Guards of Honor.
yes. Well, if you haven't heard before, during the national anthems when they were played, there were a 19 salute gunshot that was fired. It was certainly very interesting, an extra accent as a sign of friendship and honor.
And there you see the Prime Minister and the President bowing to the national flags of both countries, Indonesia and Australia.
Showcasing the National Guard wearing national costumes. National costumes from Indonesia, of course, being on full display today. Perhaps not too, still familiar to the Prime Minister, I'm sure.
And this is what we would call the inspection portion of the
Yes.
ceremony, where afterwards, both the Prime Minister and the President will return to the saluting dice.
Telah dilaksanakan. Laporan selesai.
Now, as we see them approach the steps to the presidential palace, the next part of the procession will be the Prime Minister being introduced to the members of delegation.
Yes, President Joko Widodo is introducing the members of the Indonesian delegation that are with him today.
Saat ini telah sedang dilaksanakan pengenalan delegasi dari Indonesia, yaitu menteri yang hadir dari Indonesia, yakni Menko Bidang Kemaritiman dan Investasi, Menteri Luar Negeri, Menteri
And vice
Sekretaris
versa,
Negara,
it is
Menteri
now
Perindustrian,
Prime Minister
Menteri
Albanese's turn
Perdagangan, Duta
to
Besar
introduce the Australian delegation that are
serta
visiting
Asia
the State
Pasifik
Palace
dan
of Bogor today.
Dan sekarang delegasi dari Australia sedang dikenalkan oleh Perdana Menteri, yakni ada Minister for Foreign Affairs, Minister for Trade and Tourism, Minister for Industry and Science, Member of Solomon, serta Ambassador of Australia to Indonesia.
And there we've heard several members of the delegation that the President is being introduced to. They're from Australia.
Saat ini kedua pemimpin negara tengah menuju ruang teratai untuk melaksanakan sesi foto bersama dan juga penandatanganan buku tamu.
And following the introductions, there will be a guest book signing along with a photo session.
It's a beautiful and iconic residential palace of President Joko Widodo, who is the first president to choose to reside in the Bogor State Palace instead of the traditional Istana Merdeka
Which
down
is
the
down the
road
street
from
from
us.
us, correct. And this is the Taratai room of the Bogor Presidential Palace. And there you see the Prime Minister proceeding with the guest book signing. Which will be followed by the aforementioned photo session.
Always necessary to have the complete photo session, of course.
Have to commemorate this very special event.
Yes, there has to be a photo session before the agenda and after the agenda as well.
Indeed. Now, as we know, Anthony Albanese was formally sworn in as the 31st Prime Minister of Australia, and he has pledged to prioritize ties with Indonesia. And his remarks at the Quad meeting in Tokyo several weeks ago also included a commitment to ASEAN centrality, which is a long-standing concern for Indonesia.
And here to discuss,
We're going to discuss improving Australia's relations with Indonesia and how Albanese and the new Labour government can build a relationship of trust with Indonesia in this age of great power rivalry, especially in the Indo-Pacific. We have with us in the studio international relations expert, no stranger to us here at SEA Today, Mr. Tuku Rezasha, to discuss more on this issue. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, SEA Today. It's an honor to be here.
It's great to have you here. We normally speak online, so welcome. Thanks
An
for being here.
On my side, thank you.
Great.
yes.
So let's get into this discussion. It was a very exciting event today, obviously, and Australia has made efforts to forge closer relations with Indonesia over the last 2 decades, with some ups and downs along the way, obviously. What's your projection on Australia-Indonesia relations under Albanese's?
I have to be optimistic here, because you are dealing with a prime minister. He's a man of action. Yeah. If I witness his historical background, he started from a less fortunate family, and he climbed the ladder of the Australian Labor Party since 1984, bit by bit, and sometime 2019 he became the leader of the opposition. In this case, the leader of the Australian Labor Party. I recall his promise before he was sworn in as the Prime Minister. Indonesia will be my first destination. And he made that. He proved that. It means we are dealing with a man of action, someone who knows what to do, and someone who has a concrete plan in his mind. The importance of Indonesia from the Australian perspective, I'm sure in the Australian strategic map, Australian strategic thinkers, there are a lot of pluses of Indonesia. Geopolitical pluses, geoeconomic pluses, and also geostrategic pluses. And I think the feeling is mutual with Indonesia, because when I was in Australia doing my doctorate study, the most common words I always hear at that time was, neighbors are forever. And then close neighbor is better than distant relative. This is the statement made by the Australian elite, and understood by the Australian students.
Yeah.
Because in some states inside Australia, Bahasa Indonesia is considered the second language. So it is very familiar if we go to the Australian schools. We meet students greeting us in Indonesian. Of course, in Australian accent, but we can see the essence of their heart.
Yes.
Indonesia is there. So in this case here, it is time for the elites in Indonesia and Australia to ensure that we are not only talking about business, but we are doing business nowadays. Because the framework has been prepared. Lombok Treaty is there, and then strategic partnership is there, and then economic partnership is there. It's time now to fill in the gaps, not just talking any longer. And when we saw, when in the palace a couple of minutes ago, Prime Minister Albanese introduced Pak Jokowi to his top elites, and if I see the list of the elites, there are they represent ministries who are dealing with trade.
But just a minute, we're going to talk about it a little bit more, but we also want to update our audience about what is happening in Bogor, as we can see in the screen there, currently, as a sign of friendship and a sign, I think, of commitment to climate change as well and sustainability with this particular Australian government. Currently in the agenda is tree planting, where the President of the Republic of Indonesia and Prime Minister of Australia plants dry balanups and lanceolata trees.
It's a camphor tree.
Yeah, camphor trees, right? And it's actually, it will grow to become very large. It grows up to 75 meters tall, with a straight bole, branchless for 35 meters or more, and having a diameter of up to 145 centimeter, and buttresses of up to 4 meters high and 3 meters long. The natural habitat of the camphor trees are the tallest recorded Diptera cup tree or camphor trees. Camphor timber fetches the highest prices in Borneo, and the species is also a major source of Borneo camphor. It grows on fertile clay soil up to 800 meters of altitude. Non-timber uses brittle heart is occasionally reported for the species, and it contains chemicals that discolor ferrous metals when damp.
Right, so this is something that is, I think, very unique that this particular tree was chosen. It can grow to be very long, and obviously that signifies the long and fruitful relationship that Indonesia and Australia hopes to have together. And as we know, we know that the chief of protocol of the Republic of Indonesia currently is inviting the Prime Minister of Australia and the President of the Republic of Indonesia to ride bicycles to their next location, which is Resto Rasa.
Yes. I think this is a first. You don't often see two highest authorities of a country, right, riding bicycles together. Back to sustainability,
though, right?
Back to sustainability.
Perfect. Now, as we continue to watch the procession progress, let's continue the conversation that we were having, Mas.
So you mentioned also the importance of the relationship that Indonesia and Australia already have. However, there has been a lot of data and surveys shown that historically the Australia-Indonesian relationship has been going up and down. You know, it's recently marked with some tensions and mistrust. What policies and strategies could Albanese use to really further deepen the relationship with Indonesia and for perhaps fix some of those mistrusts that happened recently?
This is the uniqueness of Indonesia-Australia relationship. There is a pattern, up and down. And we scholars tend to call this a roller coaster. It is very difficult to raise, but it can go down immediately. For example, what happened in 1998 and what happened during the wiretapping during Pak SBY's leadership. And then there it is. And then to maintain this kind of relationship, in Australia there's a term called ballast. Yeah? Ballast. We're talking about the ship. Ballast needs to be balanced. Yeah? In this case, we both of us acknowledge that the responsibility of this cordial relationship is not to be trusted to the government only. There are multiple actors inside the two countries who are also feel responsible. For example, people at the state level, people at the provincial level, people at the city level, professionals, media, businessmen. We all have responsibility in this case. So in this case, we believe that governments may go up and down, but the society remain. And this, what we call it, camper tree, it is philosophical. Not only we are talking about sustainability, but we're also talking about our capacity to see how the tree grow up. It represents what we call it, the nurturing of the bilateral relations, and also it's at the moment we are saying we are looking at the two leaders are cycling. Cycling means that the culture of health, the culture of confidence, the culture of knowing the rules, the culture of wearing the helmet. It means let's have our relationship based on a rule-based relationship, and both of them are young. The age difference is 33 months. Pak Jokowi is older. Right. But in this case, this reminds me of the personal touch between the two leaders. If I may recall, sometime in year 1993, there was an idealistic moment when Pak Suharto was in good relationship with the Australian Prime Minister at the time, Paul Keating. And at that time, Paul Keating put himself as the son of Pak Harto. He always called Pak Harto Bapak, Bapak, and Bapak. Mohon Bapak. Right. It shows a readiness from Australian side at the time to consider that Indonesia is not only a big brother, but also a source of inspiration. Yeah? Right. And now I think they are young. Pak Jokowi born in 1961, and Prime Minister Albanese born in first week of March 1963. So we could witness in the future of the brothership.
It's more of a brother. I was going to say more of a brotherly relationship.
Yes, this is something the two leaders need to acknowledge. Yeah? Correct. And this psychological relationship need to be cemented from now on. I think from now on, okay, they have this is a state function, okay. But later on, they need to make the relationship more less formal. Right. That this is something we need to witness here, because there are so many groundwork to be done. Yeah, let's say climate change, let's say investment, let's say empowerment of Indonesian students, and also the empowerment of Indonesian outer islands. On the last day of his visit, I think Prime Minister Albanese will visit the island of Sulawesi. I do not know yet what the agenda of there. I'm sure that at the moment the two leaders are thinking strongly how to empower the Indonesian infrastructure in the eastern part of Indonesia, and also especially to fulfill Pak Jokowi's dream of the global maritime fulcrum. Right. It means to empower the islands, to empower with infrastructure, and I believe they will also talk about how to empower the new capital city of Indonesia with advanced technology which Australia has. I think the final words are to be said on the last day, meaning tomorrow. Yeah. Right. And we will we will look forward to what's going to take place in the agenda during his last day's visit. One point of note for me as well is I noticed both the Prime Minister and the President have removed their jackets, rolled up their sleeves. I mean, it really signifies that they're both ready to really get hands down and put some elbow grease in working and making this relationship better. And we do know, you mentioned ballast. So let's talk a little bit about submarines, because Indonesia and Malaysia, as we know, were not informed about Australia's part in the AUKUS Pact. And as such, the pact involves nuclear submarines, which clashed with Southeast Asia's commitment to remain a nuclear-free zone. So could this issue arise during the meeting? Well, when two top leaders meet, I'm sure their dialogue will cover bilateral relationship, regional relationship and also global relationship. I'm sure they will talk about AUKUS, they will talk about G20 in Bali. But the way who will start that? This is something very sensitive, yeah.
Right.
And I'm sure they will touch this beginning with macro wordings, yeah, and then touch the essence in a very soft way, a very not pushing,
gentle,
gentle, correct. And in this case, with regard to AUKUS, we have to acknowledge, yeah, Australia belongs to the Western alignment system, global West alignment system under, for example, ANZUS, Australia, New Zealand, United States. And also there is a special security relations involving the US and Australia. And there is also delegation of security authority in the South Pacific region delivered by the American, also the UK to the Australian and New Zealand. I think this is a very sensitive issue. With regard to the submarine itself, I think both of us, we had a system here called 2+2, yeah. It is a dialogue involving two elites on the Indonesian side and also two elites on the Australian side. The elites are the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Defense.
Yes.
In this meeting, they talk honestly, yeah. So they understand each other, what is spoken, what is unspoken. So I think with regard to the AUKUS, I think Indonesia had a prior knowledge about this. And anyhow, we need to defend our position that we adhere to the ZOPFAN, known as a Zone of Peace, Freedom and Neutrality. We also adhere to the Southeast Asian Nuclear Weapon Free Zone. We adhere to the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. And also Australia is also the signatory to the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation inside ASEAN. I think Indonesia will reclaim these legal statements. And anyhow, Australia will have to understand. We are on one boat on certain issue, but we will also belong to different boat on other issues. And with regard to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Indonesia and also Australia, we agree. We agree. This is something, I think this would become the first paragraph in their final statement. And with regard to AUKUS, yeah, I think on one hand, we have to acknowledge this is endangering our principles of ZOPFAN and also Southeast Asian Nuclear Weapon Free Zone. But also at the same time, we cannot neglect that this is what Australia needs, yeah? Because the significance of submarine is there.
Yeah.
Because Australia is a continent, and the total number of Australian submarines is less than 7, I think. Even though we have to know the exact numbers, yeah. But the quality of the Australian submarine is quite advanced, and okay, we said no to the Australian nuclear submarine, but there are rooms for cooperation. We have a treaty called Lombok Treaty, signed in November 2006. I thought there are rooms for discussion. There are rooms for Indonesia to better understand the significance of the Australian nuclear submarine for the Australian defense and for the Western leadership, Western naval leadership, and also its indirect contribution to Indonesian flank. So I think we cannot totally say no to this kind of submarine, but we need to listen. And also we need receive opinion coming from Australia on the indirect benefit of that Australian submarine will indirectly also support Indonesian territorial integrity and sovereignty.
Or else it would have been dangerous. But you've spoken, one of the reasons why we have such a great relationship is because of the 2+2, the 2+2 elite meetings that usually happens every year. And even last year, they came out with great MOUs on cyber and emerging cyber technology cooperation, trilateral cooperation in the Pacific, and a renewed counterterrorism MOU as well. So they're having the tete-a-tetes, as you mentioned before. And as you can see here on the screen, the tete-a-tete session of the agenda between the President of the Republic of Indonesia and Prime Minister of Australia is set to take place. They have arrived at the Rasa restaurant and, just cleaning their hands and looking casual.
After a refreshing bike ride in Bogor?
Yeah. Bogor is such a great place to take a breath of fresh air.
Perfect for today.
They're sitting down and enjoying coffee. I think it's very important to show this, right? This does show that perhaps this brotherly bond will be established, and hopefully a less formal, relationship that you've mentioned before, Pareza.
Yes, they belong to the same generation, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think psychologically they understand each other. If we see the way they speak, it is less formal, isn't it?
Right. The
And
body
then-
language and everything.
And then the sleeve, it shows that they are ready to do business.
Yeah.
This is something, this is the message they are conveying, yeah, to the world.
Would you reckon on the new Australian cabinet, though? Because I think they are very adamant to show the world that this is a new dawn for Australia with a new government that has, new priorities as well. So with regards to the Indo-Pacific region that we slightly mentioned before, both countries so far have very different foreign policies, right? Indonesia is a more focused on autonomy and stability instead of a free and open region that the Western Union now is looking at. We have the quadrilateral summit just recently. What is your take on this?
Well, we have to acknowledge the fact, yeah, that we respect each other, but we belong to different kind of defense and security philosophy. We are non-aligned, purely non-aligned. But Australia, for history, since the end of the World War, Australia has become part of the Western camp here. Australia is linked here, linked with the US, linked with the Australian, linked with the Commonwealth of Nations, linked with the Canadian, and Australia was there whenever there was war done by the US. So we have to acknowledge we have differences, yeah, but we need each other. For example, when Australia found itself becoming a banana republic, sometime in year 1989, Australia was very eager to have Indonesia in the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation. So in this case, Indonesia can be considered as Australian passport to the wider Asia-Pacific region economic kind of cooperation.
Pareza will continue just shortly because we have now live from Bogor, our reporter Andira Putri at the Bogor Palace for a short live report on the proceedings, the tete-a-tete that is happening that we see. And we'll continue our discussion, Pareza, just shortly. Andira, what do you have for us?
Yes, afternoon, Kai. So we're at Bogor Presidential Palace with Java, and as you could see on the screen, currently President Joko Widodo with Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is having tete-a-tete, which is a private conversation between these two leaders in the restaurant around the Bogor Botanical Garden area. So Bogor Botanical Garden is actually located beside the Presidential Palace, and both leaders from these two countries go there by using bikes. But before I talk more about the bike part, I think let's talk a bit about the tete-a-tete. So this is a huge thing for them because Indonesia is the first country that Australia visited after Anthony Albanese was elected as the Prime Minister at the end of May. And then this is also usually tete-a-tete is the leaders not having it inside the restaurant, but this time, after such a long time, they choose to do it in the restaurant. In fact, this restaurant, for a leaders meeting, for an international leaders meeting, it usually, before them, it's President Barack Obama from the United States. And currently, like I mentioned before, it's a special thing because Indonesia is the first country which was chosen for Anthony Albanese first bilateral meeting, and then this is a huge opportunity for both countries. This is also to strengthen the relationship between both countries. And the Prime Minister didn't come here alone. He also brought some of the high-rank officials, including Foreign Affairs Minister Penny Wong and also the Trade Minister Don Farrell. So the Prime Minister, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, arrived at Bogor Presidential Palace at 10 a.m. this morning, and when he arrived he received such a really huge welcome, really huge response where people, the guards are coming with marching band and also with traditional clothing and also with horses. So this is some kind of festive celebration. It kind of like give them some kind of like a warm welcome regarding what is Indonesia all about and also the rich culture of Indonesia. So the third atat is actually the third agenda for today. So the first one, after he arrived and received warm welcome, both leaders did a tree plantation around the Bogor presidential area, and the tree that they have chosen is the camper tree. And then this is also actually like some kind of like a routine that international leaders, whenever they visited Indonesia, they usually do a tree plantation. And then aside from that, after the tree plantation, like I mentioned before, this is one of the most interesting thing is that both leaders kind of like chill a bit, so they left their blazer and they just go straight with their shirt and then rode a bamboo bicycle. So the path behind me, like you could see this path, and then there it goes straight to the Bogor Botanical Garden. And then just like around 15 or 10 minutes ago, both leaders actually passed this street with their bamboo bicycle and then go straight to the Bogor Botanical Garden. This is such a unique thing. This is such a unusual thing because usually, like if we talk about bilateral meeting, it usually more into some kind of like a strict or a serious partnership. But what we have seen is that they have some kind of moment to let loose a bit, to get to know each other better, to have like more personal conversation. So this is really good, especially this leading towards the tete-a-tete itself. And then after they do the private conversation in the restaurant, after that they will have the bilateral meeting, which will talk about several emerging issues. And one of them that is expected to will be the main priority is that the economic recovery, as both countries signed on the comprehensive strategic agreement in 2020, and also they also focusing on the strong partnership and economy in relation to COVID-19 recovery. And we will give you further update about this. Back to the studio.
Forward to more updates. Meanwhile, back to you in regards to the foreign policies that we were discussing. Please continue.
Yes, we belong to different camps here. We are non-aligned, and then Australia is pro-West. Yeah? This way of thinking, of course, affecting the region. Yeah? Because in this Asia-Pacific region, or some experts call the Indo-Pacific region, we have contested ideas here. How to bring the Indo-Pacific to the future. There are ideas coming from the US, and then ideas coming from the US partners, ideas coming from Australia. So thanks God, at the moment we are dealing with the ASEAN vision on Indo-Pacific. The idea is being circulated. Yeah. It is not easy, because in this contested piece of the world, there is always dispute. Yeah. Not only heart-to-heart dispute, but there is also an issue, let's say, South China Sea. There is also issue of freedom of navigation. There is also issue of Quad. There is also issue of AUKUS. There is also issue of Indian Ocean Rim Association. So these are all platforms. And we in Australia belong to different seats. We belong to different seats. Of course, the way how we were nurtured, how we were developed, how we were raised by our international system affecting the way we perceive this part of the world. Yeah? And also, this is time for Indonesia and also Australia. We have to acknowledge. There are differences, but also there are commoners. I think it would be ideal if Indonesia and Australia could become the anchor for cooperation in this Indo-Pacific region. And of course, we have to acknowledge the fact that Australia will be perceived by non-Western ally as the representing the West. And also, even though it is easy for Indonesia to claim that we are independent, but how the two work here in balancing the different kind of interests in this Indo-Pacific region, it will affect. But that's why the ongoing of the 2+2 meetings is very important. Yeah. And also the way Australia and Indonesia fill in the gaps of the Lombok Treaty is also important. Because anyhow, the world needs to see that the anchor is working based on the transparency principles, based on good governance principles. It is not aimed to become a semi-alignment in the Asia-Pacific region, no. This is something we need to convey to the world, that we are working hard to witness a more prosperous and a more peaceful Indo-Pacific region. So the idea of communication must be conveyed by the two. We know at the moment the global leadership of the US is lowering down. We are witnessing. And at the same time, we are also witnessing the peaceful rise of China to reclaim its past global leadership before the arrival of the Western dominancy in the Asia-Pacific region. And Australia, I think, and Indonesia could position itself as a balancer. And I think it's up to the security planners of the two countries how to perceive this. That's why when it comes to the bilateral meeting, we are dealing with so many confidence materials. We do not know until the end. At the end of the meeting, meaning this coming Tuesday, and it is the ideas will be nurtured by the 2+2 elite of the two countries. Yeah. This is a very sensitive thing. We are dealing with something called not alignment but semi-alignment. And we need to convey also to the world that Australia and Indonesia, we are becoming a new anchor in the Asia-Pacific region or Indo-Pacific region. And we try to become an honest partner, an honest bridge builder. So because there is always, between great powers, there are always need for consultation between the two. And also for Indonesia, our next agenda is the ASEAN Summit and also the G20 Summit. What role is to be played by Australia? Australia has claimed itself earlier on that Australia is will not come if Prime Minister Putin is coming. But in this case, considering Australian visit to Indonesia, Australia could say that they are the brother of Indonesia. Yeah? We are sovereign, Indonesia is sovereign, but we are in the capacity of working as Indonesian brother, and we also have the capacity to represent the West in conveying their disagreements with what Russia is doing. I think there are rooms for Australia to be independent in this case, to be on its own, coming to the Bogor summit and to represent the West, how they dislike the Russian attitude in the Ukraine crisis. I think there are rooms for Australia. I think Pak Jokowi will try to convince Australia to come. There is a special role for Australia to come.
We're looking forward to all of the developments that will take place after this visit as well. Pak Reza, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We do hope that this visit will certainly bring a lot of these perspectives more in line between the two countries. We thank you for your time as well. This has been our discussion with international relations expert Pak Tuku Reza Shah as well. We have some information and graphics to share with you in regards to this relations between Indonesia and Australia. Let's have a look.
Thank you, Pak. I'm honored.
And while we await the bilateral meeting, which should take place shortly, here with us now to discuss Indonesia-Australia economic relations, we have economics researcher at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Mas Dendi Rafitandi. Thank you for joining us, Mas Dendi, this morning.
Thank you very much.
Let's just get right into it. What could this visit mean for Indonesian-Australian commercial partnership, and what are you expecting?
Right. I mean, obviously, we expect a lot from this visit. In terms of international trade and also investment as well. Okay. So I think we can actually see this from the perspective of Indonesia and also Australia. They're actually a neighbor, but unfortunately we only have pretty much insignificant number of international trade amount, both export and import, and also the investment. So I think to reset this international trade and investment relation is really what we need to do in both countries. Yeah.
So it's been a very interesting development because in 2020 there is a specific agreement that has been signed, right? The IAA-SEPA that is specific to Indonesia and Australia. But if you look at the specific partnership, how is the implementation so far? Has it helped in increasing what a lot of data has showed a recent decline in trading partnership?
Right. I think it's too early to tell at first because we're still in the pandemic.
That's right.
So, right. We also see the businesses still adjusting from the recovery. But I think what I see is that from both countries, they have quite a big commitments to really maximize the benefit of Indonesia and Australia SEPA. We can see several occasions from both government, Indonesia and Australia. They are trying to increase the awareness of businesses, of course, because they're actually the one who's going to use the agreement, right? Yeah. So I think we can expect a bit of learning curve from both countries, and that, well, we have to patiently wait for them to actually learn how will I'm going to use this and utilize this agreement, right? How I'm going to use this agreement to invest in Indonesia or in Australia. So I think we have to wait a bit of time.
Just just follow up, just for a certain context, perhaps a lot of people, it's the first time to hear the IAA-SEPA because it's such a new agreement and during the pandemic. What are some of the key highlights of the benefits that that both of our countries are getting from this particular agreement?
Right. I think as you can see by the name, it's actually a comprehensive agreement. Yes. So it's more than the free trade agreement, the ordinary trade agreement, which only usually comprise of trade per se. But now we have the comprehensive one, which also includes the trade, investment. We also have other things as well, for example, in services trade as well. And they have the special chapter on investment and services. These are not the traditional chapters compared to other traditional free trade agreements. So if I can say one of the key feature of this partnership is actually the services sector. This sector, I think it's sort of like oversight from other free trade agreement. But in this partnership, they actually highlight this sector as you can see, as a future of the trade agreement that actually belongs to Indonesia and Australia. You can see that Indonesia and Australia have a very great connection in terms of the education sector. Yeah. Okay. They also have a commitment to build their healthcare industry as well, and that's also services. So I think that's the most exciting part of this partnership that you cannot really see from the other free trade agreements.
Right. And you mentioned earlier that trade has been on a low between Indonesia and Australia. In fact, between the two countries, trade has declined to the point where Indonesia is now Australia's 14th largest trading partner. That's behind Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia. But with Prime Minister Albanese's renewed commitment to bilateral relations between our two countries, how quickly can you expect a turnaround? And what do you expect, at least in this first part of his new term here?
Right. I think, well, from the background, I mean, if you compare it between Thailand, I mean, our neighbors, Thailand, Malaysia, and Vietnam as well, they already have this bilateral platform beforehand. So in Thailand, actually, they have the free trade agreement bilateral with Australia since 2005.
Okay.
So you can imagine how different with Indonesia and Australia. And I think Malaysia has the since 2013, and Vietnam also in one economic platform that you might also know, the CPTPP, which is one of the most comprehensive, the highest commitment of the comprehensive agreement. So I think it's quite late, but it's better late than never. So I think that's what we need today. And then I think the pandemic also actually encouraged both of the countries to sort of like looking for a new source of growth. And I think this partnership is really going to be useful for both countries.
Well, you know, one of the things that I'm really interested in is what entails in such an agreement. Is it policies that makes it easier and more attractive for investors to invest in Indonesia? And specifically, you mentioned that this agreement is for the service, highlights in the service industries. With this implemented, let's say 5 years from now, do you see it's possible that we go up to the top 5 of, you know, trading partnerships with Australia?
Well, I can only hope so. But I mean, pretty realistically, I mean, it's hard to get a top 5 probably.
Yeah.
But I think with the speed of what we're having today, as you can see, as my example is the education sector.
Yep.
You can already see the Monash University is one of the biggest universities in Australia. Already have commercial presence here. I mean, presence here, business presence here. So I think that's actually a very good first step for Indonesia and Australia, because I think that what I talking about the services sector, actually we have a study from the CSIS. The services sector in Indonesia it's quite excess in terms of demand. It means that we have quite a lot of demand, but quite small number of suppliers. What it means that we need to attract more foreign investors. We need more more suppliers. And Australia, I think, where you can get the best education, for example, healthcare services. So I think that's actually the complementarity between those countries. And if this complementarity can be strengthened in the next 5 years, I hope that we can actually, I don't know, make it 2 times or 3 times of investment between Indonesia and Australia.
That's so true.
Mas Andy, in your opinion, what are some of the areas of interest that currently has a lot of potential but is yet untapped yet, in your opinion?
Right. I'm going to add, well, I already add the education and services sector, but I think in terms of energy sector and also food sector, both Indonesia and Australia actually have quite a lot of good opportunity. I'm not talking about the traditional food sector energy, but we want to aim for, you know, the more sustainable.
You mean renewable energy?
Right, renewable energy, and also sustainable the food sector that actually really concerns about the sustainable as well, right? So I think we really need to go back and really take a look what kind of investment that we really want from Australia. That I think if we want to choose, we want more investment that are actually sustainable and also more inclusive, that it will bring economic growth to Indonesia.
Well, it certainly is very interesting because I'm looking at data from the announcement that's been, you know, released by DFAT last year, 2 years ago when this deal was signed, and it said that over 99% of Australian goods exported by value to Indonesia will enter duty-free.
Right.
So it means that one of the policies will issue Indonesia will issue import permits automatically and without seasonality for the things we need, like live male cattle, apparently frozen beef, as you said before, as the food sector. It's very interesting. And what do you think will be the challenges, though, in implementing such a very comprehensive and you can call it a fast track, you know, a fast track trade agreement between Indonesia and Australia?
Right. Well, I would like to say this as an opportunity, not a challenge.
Yes.
Right? But I really want to look more towards the inclusive utilization of the partnership itself. What I mean by inclusive is how you actually made the small and medium enterprises use this as their catalyst. How they can use this, you say that 90% free free tax for export from Indonesia to Australia, how can they utilize this? So I think, and it's also the other way around, how these small and medium enterprises from Australia can export goods or services to Indonesia. So I think this is really the key, how to bring the benefit into a greater portion, to have a more distributed gain of trade that we can actually usually see from like big companies, the multinational corporations as well. So how to make this partnership more down to earth and then understandable for the stakeholders that actually the small and medium enterprises, I think that would be very beneficial for both countries.
Yeah, we also do know that one of the biggest parts of our economic relations is travel and tourism. There's so many Indonesian students studying in Australia.
Correct.
We do know, we mentioned we've been in a pandemic for the past 2 years, and obviously both countries, along with others around the region, have suffered. How much of an improvement can we expect to see, in your opinion, in regards to travel and tourism, and how it will help improve the economic relations between the two countries? Because we do know that over those past 2 years, such drastic changes have been made, along with a lot of restrictions that have been eased since.
Right. I think we can see from the news that Indonesia and Australia already open up to each other. So I think that actually shows that how important this sector is. As you said, education and also travel. From both for both countries.
Right.
So I think how to get back to the pre-pandemic level is actually the other it's another questions, right?
Yeah.
So we don't want to go back to pre-pandemic, but we want to accelerate those sectors, right? So we have the education sectors open up for Indonesian students in Indonesia with the partnership with the Australian universities, but we also want to attract more travelers, not only
tourists.
Bali, I guess.
Yes,
we have like 10 new Bali, right? I mean, one of the program from the government. And actually, if we can utilize that program to really increase the awareness of Australian tourists, I think we have quite a lot of potential there.
Yes, I think that's a good target to set as well, because we are used to having so many of our Australian neighbors visiting Bali, but as you mentioned, this is now an opportunity to introduce other parts of Indonesia as well as opening up to tourism.
Well, it certainly is very fitting because the Honorable Don Farrell, Minister of Trade and Tourism, is also in the party delegation. I'm sure it will be one of the discussion as well. But now it's the elephant in the room. It is a new government. And are you optimistic about this comprehensive agreement that we have to be honored and actually to be implemented perhaps even better than before?
I think we always need to be optimistic from the start, anything from the start. What I know from several articles that I think the concern of the Australian government right now is also about the climate change and sustainability.
Yes.
That's actually one of the common ground that the both countries really have to take a look and develop further. And from the Indonesia-Australia SEPA, I think that's a very good starting platform for both countries to really develop this common ground for sustainability and combating the climate change. And also, I want to emphasize as well about the G20 agendas that Indonesia has right now. I think it also comes with the Australia as one of the G20 countries. I think Indonesia should also have a stronger relation, because we really need Australia to have the same perspective with us and to support Indonesia's agenda, for example, in the renewable energy transition, digital transformation, and also the health architecture agenda. So I think there are the G20 itself is, it's actually for the world, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a very good contribution from both Indonesia and Australia to really strengthen their cooperation, in the amid of this, the geopolitical uncertainty and conflicts. And I think having these two biggest middle power in the world, and then trying to call for the global cooperation, international cooperation, I think that will be very beneficial for the G20 and also the world.
Now, one thing that's affected the economy, not just in Indonesia and Australia, is the conflict in Ukraine. Both countries are experiencing price hikes in regards to many things. How do you see this playing out for both countries, and how can we help each other along, as we saw the President and Prime Minister basically arm in arm throughout this procession? How can we, both countries, work together in order to help the situation get better in the near future?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the G20 are actually a good platform to
It's perfect timing, isn't it?
Right, it's a perfect time. And I think beyond the political and security issues, I think both Indonesia and Australia have the same interest to really sit down all of the countries and then trying to look at how this actually have an impact on the economic side, right? Because we're not only talking about the developed countries, which is in the Europe, we're also talking about the developing countries and underdeveloped countries that actually they're not yet finished with the pandemic, but they actually really need to take a look about the rising price of food, energy, minerals, and other things as well. So I think it's really for the developing countries and underdeveloped countries, and the G20 it's a great platform for both countries.
Very fitting indeed, and we're now looking at another live feeds from the presidential palace in Bogor, where the bilateral meeting is set to take place. In the meantime, thank you for taking the time to discuss the economic situations between Indonesia and Australia. This has been Mas Dendi, Raffi Trandi. Thank you once again. We have an economic researcher for the Center of Strategic and International Studies. Right. In the meantime?
Well, Indonesia is currently welcoming the 31st Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, of course, in Bogor, as you can see from our footage.
Correct. And this visit marks Albanese's first state visit since taking office in May. Now, in the following coverage, we're going to have a look at the new Prime Minister and why he selected Indonesia as his first state visit destination.
Anthony Norman Albanese, otherwise known as Albo, is an Australian politician who is currently served as the 31st Prime Minister of Australia after the party he led, the Labour Party, won the first general election in 9 years. The Labour Party won a narrow 76 votes out of 151 seats in Parliament. Albanese has led the Labour Party since 2019, when he succeeded Bill Shorten. During his leadership, Albanese focused on climate change issues, affordable childcare, and government-assisted health services expansion.
Together we can be a self-reliant, resilient nation, confident in our values and in our place in the world. And together we can embrace the Uluru Statement from the Heart. We can answer its patient, gracious call for a voice enshrined in our Constitution. Because all of us ought to be proud that amongst our great multicultural society, we count the oldest living continuous culture in the world.
Albo planned to visit Indonesia for his first state visit after attending the Quad meeting in Japan. It becomes conventional for Australian newly elected leaders to visit Indonesia in their first state visit. The Indonesian Foreign Affairs Ministry stated that Albanese's visit underlines strategic partnership between the two countries.
Nah, dalam pertemuan tersebut diharapkan kedua pemimpin berfokus pada upaya penguatan kemitraan ekonomi di antara kedua negara, terutama dalam rangka upaya percepatan pemulihan ekonomi, pemulihan secara umum pasca pandemi. Terdapat juga kemungkinan bahwa kedua pemimpin akan mengangkat isu-isu yang menjadi perhatian bersama di tingkat regional ataupun tingkat global.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and his cabinet members are scheduled to visit Jakarta on Sunday.
What you're currently seeing is the bilateral meeting that is currently taking place between the government of the Republic of Indonesia and the government of Australia, attended by the Australian delegation, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Minister, Minister of Trade and Tourism, Minister for Industry and Science. There are also parliament members for Solomon Islands and Ambassador of Australia
Sekali
to
lagi saya
Indonesia.
ingin menyampaikan ucapan selamat datang kepada Perdana Menteri Albanese dan rombongan di Indonesia. Tentunya merupakan kehormatan bagi saya menerima kunjungan ini, kunjungan yang pertama, dan di tengah situasi dunia yang sangat dinamis dan penuh tantangan, menjadi semakin penting artinya bagi Indonesia dan Australia untuk terus memperkuat kerjasama bilateral. Selain untuk kepentingan bilateral, kerjasama yang kokoh juga dapat kita kontribusikan bagi perdamaian dan kesejahteraan di kawasan maupun di dunia. Di pertemuan empat mata tadi kita juga telah membahas beberapa isu terkait situasi baik ekonomi maupun perang di Ukraina.
The President is starting the meeting by greeting all the attendees as well as some of the discussion points between he and the Prime Minister before attending the meeting. And in the meantime, continuing on with the list of attendees, we have the Senior Advisor for the Office of the Prime Minister, as well as the First Assistant Secretary for the International Department of the Prime Minister, Ms. Katrina Cooper. And we will now hear from Prime Minister Anthony Albanese.
We're experiencing some technical difficulties, but it looks like a very merry start to the meeting with lots of smiles and laughter. I think the Prime Minister was just introducing his party, that is his delegation that is also present in this bilateral meeting, as we just discussed with Pak Teguh Reza Shah and of course Mas Dandi, the importance of this particular bilateral meeting and how this particular region is looking at Indonesia and Australia's gathering, because this could be the balancing act, the bridge between the West and East.
Pertemuan bilateral antar kedua negara yang pada sambutan awalnya tadi Presiden Joko Widodo menyebut mengenai pembahasan yang akan dibahas saat pertemuan ini adalah dalam bidang ekonomi. Dan juga pada saat pertemuan tatap muka tadi, kedua pemimpin negara sempat berbincang mengenai hal perdamaian di kawasan. Dan kita saat ini tengah menunggu keberlangsungan pertemuan bilateral selesai dilaksanakan dan nantinya kita akan saksikan bersama keterangan pers antar kedua pemimpin negara untuk menjelaskan hasil pertemuan yang didapatkan pada kunjungan Perdana Menteri Australia ke Indonesia pada hari ini.
Later on, after the bilateral meeting, we will have an official press conference where they will discuss all of the points that were talked about during the meeting. But obviously, some of the points that was touched on was economic relations, as we discussed, the peace talks around the region. I've heard as well President Jokowi mentioned that they did discuss the Ukraine conflict as well between the two of them. So it'll be very interesting to see what points will be mentioned after the meeting.
Yes, and this might be the first state visit, but I think after this, as mentioned by Pareza, the minister on the ministerial level, they will also meet to discuss further details. But we also have a live contribution from one of our very own contributors in Australia at this moment. I mean, we are going to be talking about the the victory of the victory of, I was just going to say, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, of course, and how it's going to impact this particular region.
Okay, and as mentioned by Reza, it was very noteworthy for me to see that not only did he mention before he took office and before he was even Prime Minister that, hey, I'm going to make a renewed commitment to our neighbor Indonesia, and that's the first state visit that he made. I mean, that really certainly shows something, that he's a man of his word, for one, that he certainly made us a priority for us to visit. And, all of these things can only happen once the proper steps are taken. And I believe that making the state visit was the very important first step that needs to be done.
Yes. And now we have our Australian contributor, Muhammad Andri, to discuss the implications of Albanese's victory to Indonesia and Australia relations. Hi, Mas Andri.
And, all of these things can only happen once the steps are taken.
That's a little bit of a delay.
Windy out there.
Well, Mas Andri, hello.
Yeah, we do have a bit of a delay.
Yeah, a bit of a delay. It's the connection. It looks like a very windy situation. But on that note, though, it was very interesting for me. The timing is also so fitting after the particular Quad meeting. That Indonesia is the first bilateral state meeting. I mean, officially, he has, Prime Minister Albanese has met with leaders of the Western Bloc and also, Japan and Korea and India to discuss this particular summit. And then perhaps we are trusted as a country that can manage the balance between this region, because we are very different, as Patuku Reza Shah has mentioned before, we're very different in
That's the thing. It's unique,
in our relations.
Right?
It's very unique how two completely different perspectives can still find common ground and listen to each other's common interests.
Well, there has to be a balancing act, right? Because geographically, we are very much neighbors. But on one hand, Australia is very much aligned with the West. And it's always a delicate balancing act for Australia for where they are geographically and where they are politically. And so far, they've been doing a great job between the two countries, not only with Australia and Indonesia, but other countries around the region as well. But there's always room for improvement. There's always ways we can strengthen these relationships. And because of the pandemic the last 2 years has really kind of flipped everything on its head, and it's really kind of put economy on the forefront of everything as well.
Well, we actually have another interview. We are connected with one of the universities that was mentioned earlier as a cooperating balance here in Indonesia, that is Monash University, Indonesian president, Mr. Andrew McIntyre. Thank you for joining us.
Hi there.
Well, we're going to try to tweak the if you could unmute yourself, perhaps. We're just checking in.
Are you there?
Hi.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
Oh, there you go.
Right, we've got you.
We hear you. It's just very small at this moment.
All right.
Volume okay, or shall I turn?
Now it's perfect. There you go.
There you go.
Well, hello, Andrew. Good morning. First of all, congratulations for the brand new Monash University in Indonesia.
Yeah, well, thank you. Monash is very proud to be the first foreign university invited by government of Indonesia. And I have to say, personally, I'm just delighted to be back in Indonesia myself.
Great to have you too.
Yeah, I mean, this is my father is actually an alumni of Monash University, so for me it feels like a long time coming for this particular university to arrive in Indonesia, as it already has in our neighboring countries. But how do you think, straight away, so this one bilateral meeting that is happening in Indonesia, how do you think the new administration of Australia can enhance our relationship, especially in the cultural and education sector?
Yeah, well, look, it's a good opportunity, yeah. Anytime there's a change of government, change of leader, it's an opportunity for a reset. That doesn't mean that everything gets thrown away and starts again completely from the beginning. There will be important elements of continuity. But it's also a chance. It is also a chance for a new spirit, yeah, a new semangat to be brought into the relationship. And I'm really hopeful that that's what will happen. I think you can, from the footage we've seen already, of the cabinet meeting going on, or the meeting of cabinet ministers on both sides in Bogor. You can see the enthusiasm around the table, yeah? It's a new government from Australia. They will be very keen to try and establish close connections. Well, I guess what I'm hoping for is, on the one hand, a spirit of enthusiasm, and on the other hand, I'm hoping for consistency. It's easy for governments, especially new governments, to come in with enthusiasm. It's much harder to stay consistently focused, especially with all the challenges that life throws up, yeah? But that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping for a spirit of enthusiasm, and I'm hoping for consistency. I think there's a lot that can be done in the education and culture space, a lot.
We certainly are hoping for the same as well. Hi, Andrew. Paul here. So, Andrew, as a member of the Australian faculty, there has been a declining interest for Bahasa Indonesia among Australian students over the past 2 decades. Could you tell us, or perhaps expand as to the reason why and how you think this can be improved in the near future?
Yeah, look, it is a problem. It's a problem for Australia. I should say it's not just Bahasa Indonesia.
Oh.
It's all foreign, or almost all foreign languages have gone down in what students want to study. And I should also say it's not just in Australia. You see something of this phenomenon happening in other countries as well. Nevertheless, it is a problem. Let's not pretend it isn't. If I was to speculate on causes, I would say that one of the factors is too many people think they can get by just using English. And again, we see that in many parts of the world, yeah? But if I look at specific issues in Australia, funding to support teachers in this area has gone down over time. It just hasn't received the priority it did when I was a student back in school and I could do Bahasa Indonesia in my local school. And I think a lot of us are hoping to see a new emphasis on language. But let me also quickly mention, Paul, language is really important, but it's not the only element of what in Australia we call Asia literacy, or more specifically, Indonesia literacy. There's also just having understanding of cultural context, of having, especially in business circles, experience and people connections, yeah? So there's a lot of room for improvement there.
Yes, I want to note to you, Paul, that when my father was studying in Monash University, there was actually a very comprehensive Indonesian studies major, where people were learning the gamelan, learning the dances. And Andrew, are you still with us? You're still with us, right? Yes. But speaking on that, the people connection that is just so important, how do you think both Indonesia and Australia can develop a strong collaboration despite the life's challenges that you've mentioned before that are being thrown at all of us right now? And what are the main challenges, apart from consistency that you've already mentioned? How can we build a mutual learning relationship between the two nations?
So there's obviously a lot that can be done in the government sector, government to government. But both governments have been working on that for some time now. The areas that I would look most closely at are education and business. Then another category perhaps we could talk about is tourism. But that's a little bit different, yeah? Education and business, I think there's a lot governments can do to encourage this. I know from just as like you, Kai, Indonesians who have studied at a university in Australia, in the case of Monash, I know we've had a huge number of students from Indonesia to Monash campuses. And that has such a positive effect for just greater understanding of culture. And I know Monash sends many of its students to Indonesia for learning experiences, and that helps them greatly. So the more student exchanges, whether it's university or school, the better. But I would also really encourage business connections. The more we can get people from companies, including senior people, to be taking part in exchange programs, the more long-term benefit that will have. What governments do is really important for setting the foundations, but in the end, it's the people contacts that make a bilateral relationship come alive.
Andrew, you mentioned tourism as something that is very important in strengthening relationships. So let's talk a little bit tourism. As we know, Indonesia is one of the top destinations for Australian tourists. Despite going through 2 years of a pandemic, we're starting to see an influx of Australian tourists once again within our country. But we do know, however, the number of Indonesian visitors to Australia has always been lower. Why do you think that is, and what do you think can be done to put a fix on that situation?
So yeah, Australians love coming to Indonesia. Indonesia is so close, it's so beautiful. Australians always enjoy coming to Indonesia. Look, if I think about Indonesian tourism, I guess that Indonesian people who can travel overseas enjoy going to Europe or Japan or to America. These are all wonderful places to go, yeah? But here's something I also know. When I talk to Indonesians who have come to Australia, they always have a good time and nearly always come back again. And I think that as this gains a bit more momentum, as people rediscover travel post-pandemic, and particularly as we all look for exciting travel opportunities in our own region, as we all become more joined up, more connected as one shared region, I'm quietly confident that Indonesian tourism to Australia will grow.
It certainly helps that the restrictions have certainly been eased everywhere across the region, including in Australia. And many Indonesians I know have family and friends there, and will be making more frequent visits as well.
I think that was a
And I always see in Melbourne, my city in Australia, I always see Indonesians going to cool coffee shops and places like that.
We love our coffee shops.
We love our coffee. We love our coffee shops, and we love the fact that Melbourne has very great, authentic coffee shops. Not like the franchises, I'm sorry, but like you have great experience. The coffee experience is different there. I'm certainly one of those who always want to return to Australia. And Australia, you know, as you mentioned before, the people-people connection becomes even more important because no matter what the higher ups do, however the friendship is higher up. We had an international relations experts before. The dynamic of the people to people at the end of the day is still very, very important. Now, Australia has made efforts to forge closer relations with Indonesia over the last 2 decades, with some ups and downs along the way, as we know. But what's your projection on Australia-Indonesian relations under the current governance of Prime Minister Albanese?
Look, I'm optimistic. As I said before, I think there's a strong mood in this new government to take this opportunity post-pandemic to deepen and expand ties in the region, and particularly with Indonesia. And that's why they've pushed so hard to get together this large and senior delegation to come so quickly to Indonesia. As I said, if this government can bring not just enthusiasm, but also consistency, I think that will make a real difference. Australian governments for a long time, like Indonesian governments for a long time, have been looking to strengthen the relationship, to deepen the relationship, but it's that challenge of consistency that always gets in the way. So if we can keep that going, I think there are big opportunities for us to do things together in the economic space, in areas like climate, and in foreign policy areas.
All right, and speaking of which, you know, every relationship, every close relationship always has its ups and downs, and historically, Indonesia and Australia is no different. So what foreign policies or strategies do you think Albanese, now that he's taken office, could use to deepen this relationship with our country?
Yeah, look, you're right. There have been ups and downs, as there are in most relationships. If I look at the history, I would say sometimes there have been mistakes made, Sometimes there's just been misunderstandings. Other times there have been genuine differences of interest. But what really strikes me is how more and more the bilateral relationship between Jakarta and Canberra is not about complaining about each other. It's more and more about talking together about shared challenges in the region and the world around us. If you like, not so much talking about each other, but talking about other challenges in the world.
Right.
And I think we're seeing more and more of it. And the broad areas that I would nominate Paul to focus on will be economic, climate, and foreign policy. And I think in those three areas, we'll see both Indonesian government and Australian government being keen to really look at practical things they can do together.
That's certainly
fitting with the G20 coming.
Yes, the G20. So I just wanted to ask, this is important to the people and people mood, if you might say. You know, Indonesia and Malaysia were not informed about Australia's part in the AUKUS Pact, and since the pact involves, you know, lots of differences in perspectives, nuclear submarines, which initially clashed with, you know, Southeast Asia's commitment to remain a nuclear weapon-free zone. This is seriously political and, you know, security-sensitive issue, but does this translate to the people-to-people mood, according to your analysis? How could this issue take over the meeting, and how can the government, do you think, from an Australian perspective, tackle this sensitive issue?
Yeah, good question, Kai, important question. Of course it will be discussed by the leaders. It will have to be discussed. It's a major issue. In my personal opinion, Australia could have handled the communications around this better. That's my personal opinion. But regardless, I'm sure it will be discussed. I don't think it will take over the meeting, fundamentally because neither side has an interest in it taking over the meeting.
Yeah.
My personal hope is that actually Prime Minister Albanese will take the lead in raising the issue and not leaving it to President Jokowi to have to bring it up.
Yep.
Right.
So I would be not at all surprised if Prime Minister Albanese raises it, explains what Australia's thinking is, talks explicitly about how Australia and the United States and the United Kingdom are committed to finding ways to make sure that this is associated with a strengthening of the anti-proliferation regime.
Yeah.
So my hope, and I'm going to say my expectation, is that while this has been a problem, I think it's something that both governments can jump on, repair, and use as part of moving forward. I don't think it's the kind of thing that's going to attract big attention in the wider public sphere for a long time. Yes, of course it gets some headlines, but I don't think it will dominate people-to-people relationships at all. It's more a government thing.
Yeah. Well, certainly, Andrew, thank you so much for your time today, specifically enlightening us on the people-to-people connection, because our two countries do have a very unique relationship. We have a lot of different perspectives, but we always manage to find our common grounds.
Yeah.
So, Andrew McIntyre, president of the Monash University in Indonesia now. Thank you
for
so much
joining
for your
us.
time.
Semangat selalu.
Semangat selalu.
Good to have you back in Indonesia.
Kai and Paul, just as I finish,
Yes.
when you've got some spare time, we would love to welcome you to Indonesia's first foreign university campus and show you around.
We would love to go.
I think you'll be quite surprised.
Oh, well.
Ini memang luar biasa. There's not another university campus like this. So we'll have to get you out to show you around.
Well,
Yes,
your grasp of the Indonesian language has already caught me by surprise. So that's great. I can't wait to visit you over at the campus, the new campus.
Thank you, Andrew.
Good luck, Andrew.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Selamat siang.
No. You know, this just proves just how a certain generation in Australia really got a lot of, a connecting education.
It's like embedded already,
yeah, it's like embedded.
right? Yeah.
And there are still certain regions I know that has curriculum in Indonesian since primarily school. I think in the Northern Territory for sure, because my father was posted in the Northern Territory, and they have a lot of student exchanges and things. So a lot of interesting things. You know, we have a very unique relationship with Australia, certainly. And currently, it is still happening the bilateral meeting between Indonesia and Australia in the Bogor State Palace. And while we are waiting, of course, Anthony Albanese's victory in Australia's federal election may lead to stronger links with Jakarta, hopefully so, but in politics and people-to-people contact even more so. And even though some analysts have warned of major challenges facing this new prime minister, we now have our Australian contributor Muhammad Andri to discuss the implications of this new government, of Albanese's victory to Indonesia-Australia relationship. Can we finally welcome you, Andri? How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys
Yes. We're doing great. We're enjoying this particular, segment talking about the relationship to Indonesia and Australia. But how do you see Australia's response to the new prime minister there?
Well, I mean, in the wide point of view, as the new prime minister, I think Anthony Albanese attempts to set the agenda and tone of the next parliament. Climate policy obviously is shaping up as the key battleground, with Labour confronted by green dominations as well, and a position that won't back Labour's target. Labour was being called the winner in 75 or at least 67% of the votes counted during the last elections. But the current trend in Australian politics, I would say the Teal independents are shown as a greener side than Liberal Party's traditional blue-collar representations. And obviously, stronger government movements on reducing Australian greenhouse gas emissions is highly expected by the people in Australia. On the other side, most of the successful candidates are coming from female candidates. And I think this is because of the denial, from the Scott Morrison's government that he's been, denying there was a sexual harassment in the parliament during his last 3 years in the government.
Andri, hi, Paul here. How confident are Australians towards Prime Minister Albanese's foreign policies that is attempting right now to strengthen ties with Indonesia?
Well, I think by visiting Jakarta so early, since he became the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese points out that what he said during this elections campaign about the importance of forging good relationship with Indonesia. Mr. Albanese had intended to be his first overseas visit, but this was overtaken by the trip to Tokyo for court meeting days after he being sworn. I spoke to the people underground as well, like the business owners. They basically have a very positive tones about Albanese's visit to Jakarta. What Australia wants is basically good relationship not only to Indonesia, but also for the whole Asian Pacific regions. And because I heard like you had a discussion before about the bahasa learning bahasa teaching in school in Australia, because I spoke to the professor from the Monash University last week. The main issue here is they don't have enough teachers in Australia, and by having the new governments, because Labor has a very good historical between Indonesia and Australia, so basically all the educational sectors, they are hoping that this government will bring more projects to the educational sectors, especially in Bahasa learning in Australia.
Well, that's certainly interesting because we just spoken to the Monash University president here in Indonesia, and that was one of the things that we talked about. But how do you think our people-to-people connections are? Since you mentioned that you've spoken to Australians underground, what are the sentiments of Australia, about Indonesia right now? Are they excited to be able to visit Indonesia again? And my question is, will they start visiting Indonesia beyond just Bali?
Well, that is a very good question. I spoke to the few people as well who has a business in Bali, because Bali just reopened the gate a few months back, and they are very happy with the new policy from Indonesian government, especially to cut off the quarantine days in Indonesia. So in terms of business visit as well to Indonesia and not only to Bali, this will cut the business trip costs in terms of the cost of trip to Indonesia. Other than that, I think this is a new beginning for everyone. Basically, not only for the relationship between Indonesia and Australia, but also economic as a whole. So a lot of things need to be done for the time being. But I think this is a new good beginning for everyone, especially for Indonesia and Australia.
Andre, conversely, how is the Indonesian climate, so to speak, over there right now in regards to tourism for more Indonesian travelers to head to Australia, businesses as well as education?
What do you mean, the Indonesian climate here?
Yes, since the easing of the restrictions.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So the interesting point is, if you see the data from Indonesian government, Australia is the top positioning the level in tourism, the tourists coming to Indonesia. And from Australia perspective as well, I mean, Bali is the top destinations now in Australia. So if you see the flight schedule, I think there are at least 3 to 5 flights per week from Australia to Bali.
Great.
So the number is really increasing for the last few months, especially when Bali reopened the gate again.
All right. Anyway, Mohammed Andre, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate your report from all the way out there in Australia. That's our correspondent out in Australia, Mohammed Andre, as we still broadcast to you live for the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's visit here in Indonesia. Andre, we'll check in with you again real soon.
Ciao.
And, great to know as well that apart from, the timing is everything, isn't it, when it comes to these things? And Prime Minister Albanese's election into office as the new Prime Minister couldn't come at a more proper time. We talk about travel, we talk about education, we talk about Monash just opening their university here in Indonesia. And I think it just sets the stage perfectly for us to be able to strengthen the relationship between Indonesia and Australia. I personally, though, ashamed to say, I've never been to Australia.
Wow.
Despite all the years of being here. Because it's always one of those things that I always said, oh yeah, I'm going to go there real soon, but just haven't had the chance. I have friends who own apartments over there. I have friends to visit. And then the pandemic happened. Just when I was about to take my first kid to travel over there, pandemic happened. And then now I kind of regret it, but I'm so glad that I'm able to travel there again.
But you have another baby coming, so you'll be a party of 5 going to Australia next. And it's great. There's something for everybody there.
When was the last time you visited, by the way?
I visited last time 2019.
Right, so right before the pandemic.
Yes, right before the pandemic. In December too.
Yeah.
Right before the pandemic.
Lots of things to see over there, right?
Yes, it's a whole continent. It's a whole continent. So just about Australia, we have a couple of fun facts, because when we think about kangaroos and koalas, obviously we immediately think where these animals come from.
Well, you just mentioned the 2 things that I really want to see when I go to Australia.
Hug a koala.
But there are plenty of other unique things about the land down under, which we have compiled for you in the following coverage. Let's have a look.
Australia, which is a British Commonwealth country, is also the world's smallest continent. Its location in the southern hemisphere makes it geographically close to the South Pole. Australia is also the 6th largest country in the world with a large indigenous population. Being both a continent and a country, Australia has a number of unique facts that you must know. According to 2016 The Daily News article, there are around 44 million kangaroos in Australia, or twice the country's population. Thus, It should come to no surprise, the land is known as the Kangaroo Country. A few years later though, ABC reported a 25.5% decline in kangaroo population between 2019 and 2020 due to the droughts, or about 4 million. Now, the Australian government is again carrying out conservation and protection of these mammals. The Australian continent is home to various deadly species. According to the Australian Geographic, there are at least 30 species considered dangerous and deadly. They include box jellyfish, hunting bees, great white sharks, swamp crocodiles, taipan snakes, pufferfish, redback spiders, blue ring octopuses, and the Sydney funnel web spiders, just to name a few. Australia's Great Barrier Reef is the world's largest living structure and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Located on the northeast coast of Australia, the reef contains 400 species of coral, 1,500 species of fish, and 4,000 species of mollusks. With an area spanning 348,000 square kilometers, this reef is visible from space. The Australian society is among the world's most developed and prosperous. According to the US News, Australia is among the best countries or region in terms of quality of life, education, public facilities, quality of medical service, per capita income, and so on. With a population of 25 million, Australia is among the least densely populated country, with a density of 3 people per square kilometer. This puts it below Canada, the UK, and the neighboring New Zealand.
All right, there you have it. We're now looking at a little bit of background information on Australia's new Prime Minister, as he is currently still in the meeting with Indonesian President and other members of the delegation from Indonesia and Australia, which should be coming to an end real soon.
Yep. And as we've mentioned on our previous talk shows, it looks like there are some common words that has been mentioned by 3 different talk shows so far.
Correct.
It's the bilateral relationship. Of course, the geopolitical situation right now is shifting, and perhaps this new government will change a lot of things and a new perspective for Indonesian and Australian relationship. And then you talk about economics and business. Of course, there are lots and lots of opportunities. Very comprehensive agreement that has been signed in 2020. So looking forward to implementing that. Of course, I think another thing that was mentioned was a lot education.
Education. I was just going to say education was brought up a lot.
Yeah.
And how many friends of yours go to or have
many.
gone to school in university or Melbourne,
Too many,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that is something that has always been. And you mentioned that your father went to Monash University.
My father went to Monash University, and he was posted. His last posting was in Sydney and Darwin, so he actually finished his diplomacy career in Darwin. So it's very.
So this has been ongoing for
this has been
years.
ongoing, yes. So actually, the Indonesian Indonesian-Australian scholarship, the Australian scholarship that's been given to Indonesia is one of the longest, if not the longest scholarship relationship bilaterally of Australia. It started in 1953.
Wow.
So it's been, I think...
Not long after independence.
Yeah. Yes, not long after independence straight away. So can you imagine such a deep tie when it comes to education?
Yeah, and as well as the upcoming G20, we did mention some of the things that will be touched upon during the meeting. The energy sector, very important there as well. We do know that renewable energy is such a big agenda on the G20 meeting as well. And Australia, like many other countries, I'm sure, are looking into more ways in order for them to use sustainable energy, renewable energy. And Indonesia certainly can be a good source for that. We do know that we are one of the largest producers for nickel as well that can be used in electric cars, batteries, and things of that sort. So definitely following this, I guess, this can be a kickoff to the momentum for what can take place at the G20, because not only will Australia be in attendance, but the other countries as well.
Yes, I think it's also really important that in light of the current situation that Indonesia manages to convince every party to be present of the importance that it's not just the Western countries that benefits out of this G20, but the developing and underdeveloped, developing countries are very much looking forward to the G20 decision, because it might be their blueprint, as mentioned by Mas Dandi before. Right. Everybody is waiting for this G20 meeting, because this is the bridge, right? When we talk about G7, those are the most developed economies in the world. But when we talk about G20, it's more inclusive. And those under the G20 are looking to the decisions and the frameworks that happens in G20. So. And
arguably will have more to benefit from these meetings and these summits as well, are the developing countries. We also touched upon many other things as well, and we're looking at some of the points right now in regards to the Australia-Indonesia bilateral relations.
And the foreign and defense ministers 2+2 meeting that's been very much heated, because 2+2, they have that annually. And if I'm not mistaken, 2021, they also recently signed a new MOU. We actually covered it also last year, if I'm not mistaken yet. And it's very interesting that it just shows how important these one-on-one and ministerial level meeting also is, because it's great to see the two leaders meeting, but on a ministerial level, while the policies are being made and being implemented, I think it's also very good that we get to have these one-on-one relationships as well.
And our conversation with Pak Reza, he highlighted one thing that I never actually noticed before, that how the president and prime minister are very similar in age. They come from the same generation. Yeah. And if you just kind of take a quick overview of the procession, it just seems like, oh, it's a really nice procession. But everything was done for a reason. The tree planting was done for a reason. They rode their bicycles for a reason. They could have easily been driven in their cars. But obviously, everything was done for a reason. And I think it signifies what they're trying to do, not just how they're going to do it, but it really outlines the importance of climate change. That is a big focus, by planting the tree, by riding the bicycles made out of bamboo, and the fact that they were doing this together and that they want to work together and really kind of hands-on get into all of the agendas that they were going to be discussing.
And the way the bilateral meeting was kicked off, though, I mean, there were enthusiasm, there were smiles, there were laughter.
I wish I could have heard what was being said there. We just kind of lost the feed for a moment, but I think Prime Minister Albanese made kind of just some light comments in order to lighten the mood a little bit to kick off the meeting. I think.
Because we know that our president can start off sometimes very serious, but we know that he's actually very lighthearted. Right. Well, we are about to witness the press conference really soon, as you can see here.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to starting our joint press statement of the Republic of Indonesia and Australia. Joint press statement begin. We would like to hear opening remarks, joint press statement from the President of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Mr. Joko Widodo.
Yang terhormat Perdana Menteri Anthony Albanese, merupakan kehormatan bagi saya menerima kunjungan Perdana Menteri Australia yang baru, Bapak Anthony Albanese, beserta delegasi. Saya bergembira bahwa Indonesia menjadi tujuan yang pertama kunjungan bilateral Perdana Menteri Albanese. Setelah 2 minggu yang lalu dilantik sebagai Perdana Menteri Australia ke-31. Hal ini menunjukkan kedekatan antara pemerintah dan masyarakat kedua negara. Perdana Menteri Albanese bukan orang baru bagi saya. Kita pernah bertemu di tahun 2020. Dan Indonesia juga menjadi negara pertama yang dikunjungi pada saat beliau terpilih sebagai ketua oposisi di tahun 2019. Jumat lalu kita juga melakukan pembicaraan per telepon. Indonesia dan Australia telah memiliki dua fondasi kuat dalam hubungan bilateral, yaitu kemitraan strategis komprehensif yang dimiliki sejak 2018 dan Indonesia-Australia SEPA yang sudah mulai berlaku di tahun 2020. Dua fondasi ini sangat penting bagi kedua negara untuk terus memperkokoh kerjasama bilateral yang saling menguntungkan, dan dalam pertemuan bilateral tadi kita membahas dua isu besar, yaitu upaya memperkuat kerjasama bilateral dan saling tukar pendapat mengenai berbagai isu di kawasan dan dunia. Mengenai isu-isu bilateral, kita lebih fokus berbicara mengenai kerjasama ekonomi. Beberapa hal yang saya sampaikan, pertama, saya menyampaikan pentingnya perluasan akses ekspor produk Indonesia dengan nilai tambah tinggi ke Australia, misalnya otomotif. Ekspor perdana mobil CBU completely built up buatan Indonesia ke Australia telah dimulai di bulan Februari yang lalu. Dan saya mengharapkan akses ekspor seperti ini akan terus terbuka. Yang kedua, saya mengharapkan implementasi IASEPA terutama terkait kesempatan WNI untuk bekerja di Australia dapat ditingkatkan, termasuk penambahan kuota working holiday visa menjadi 5.000 peserta per tahun. Yang ketiga, saya menyambut baik kerjasama di bidang pendidikan dan kesehatan. Pembukaan kampus Monash University di BSD diharapkan meningkatkan investasi Australia bagi pengembangan SDM berketerampilan tinggi di Indonesia. Saya juga mengapresiasi investasi Aspen Medical untuk membangun 23 rumah sakit dan 650 klinik di Provinsi Jawa Barat senilai $1 miliar selama 20 tahun. Yang keempat, penting bagi kita untuk memperkuat ketahanan pangan. Kita membahas upaya menjaga keberlanjutan rantai pasok pangan termasuk gandum di tengah situasi dunia yang sangat sulit ini. Kerjasama peningkatan kapasitas di bidang food processing, food innovation, dan rantai pasok penting untuk diperkuat. Saya juga menekankan pentingnya MOU pertanian antara kedua negara segera diimplementasikan. Kelima, pentingnya penguatan kerjasama energi dan perubahan iklim. Saya menyambut baik inisiatif PM Albanese terkait kemitraan infrastruktur dan ketahanan iklim Republik Indonesia Australia dengan dana hibah awal sebesar $200 juta. Saya juga menyambut baik komitmen investasi Fortescue Metal Group di bidang hydropower dan geothermal senilai $10 miliar dan Sun Cable di bidang energi senilai $1,5 miliar. Untuk isu kawasan dan dunia, kita antara lain melakukan tukar pikiran mengenai perang di Ukraina, kerjasama Indo-Pasifik, dan penguatan kemitraan pembangunan di Pasifik. Secara umum, saya menyampaikan kembali posisi konsisten Indonesia bahwa hubungan baik kedua negara dapat memberikan kontribusi bagi perdamaian dan kemakmuran kawasan. Untuk itu, prinsip-prinsip dan hukum internasional harus dipatuhi secara konsisten. Strategic competition di kawasan perlu dikelola dengan baik untuk menghindari terjadinya konflik terbuka. Budaya damai dan strategic trust perlu terus diperkuat. Kita juga sepakat untuk memperkuat kemitraan di Pasifik, terutama di bidang iklim perikanan, dan pertanian. Terakhir, saya berharap Perdana Menteri Albanese dapat hadir dalam KTT G20 di bulan November di Bali. Demikian yang dapat saya sampaikan. Sekarang saya mengundang yang terhormat Perdana Menteri Albanese untuk menyampaikan pandangannya. Terima kasih.
Well, terima kasih, Mr. President, and I want to thank President Joko Widodo and his ministerial team for their very warm welcome and for hosting a most productive annual leaders meeting. So I reiterate, Mr. President, terima kasih, Bapak President. Australia's relationship with Indonesia is one of our most important. We're linked not just by geography, we are linked by choice. We've enjoyed a long history of cooperation and friendship, and our relationship is ever deepened by the strategic and economic interests that we share. Here in Jakarta, I'm accompanied by Foreign Minister Penny Wong, Trade Minister Don Farrell, Industry Minister Ed Husick, and Luke Gosling, who represents Darwin in my team. A group of senior Australian business leaders have also joined me. We've all come because of our collective regard for Indonesia, the importance of the agenda that we've just discussed, and the enormous opportunity that we see here. I have a lot of respect for President Widodo's high ambitions for Indonesia's future, and I share his optimism. Today I informed President Widodo that I will attend the G20 Leaders Summit in Bali in November. I did so because the work of the G20 is critical at this time of global economic uncertainty, and it will be by working with Indonesia that we most effectively tackle the many challenges we face in navigating the post-COVID global economic recovery. I will work closely with President Widodo to help deliver a successful summit, and we discussed that this morning. Indonesia is on track to be one of the world's 5 largest economies. Revitalising our trade and investment relationship is a priority for my government, and it's why we plan to work with Indonesia to realise the potential of the Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. Our economic ministers will meet regularly, and we will continue to secure the backing of business on both sides. My government will work with Australian super funds, among our largest investors, to explore investment opportunities here in Indonesia. And the senior Australian CEOs who are here with me will be at the vanguard of a sustained campaign by Australian government and business to seize these opportunities. Bapak President, I also look forward to advancing our $200 million climate and infrastructure partnership with Indonesia. True to my government's ambitious climate targets, I want better access to affordable, reliable and secure clean energy right across our region as we transition to a net zero world together. Your planned national capital, Nusantara, is an incredibly exciting prospect, a nation-building project signalling where Indonesia is headed. And I'm pleased to offer Australian technical expertise to help you plan a clean, green, high-tech city. My government also intends to rebuild Australia's Indonesian language skills through support to the Australian Consortium for In-Country Indonesian Studies program. More Australians speaking Bahasa Indonesian will be vital to deepening our relationship. Several of my ministers and MPs, including the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Chris Bowen, and the Member for Solomon, Luke Gosling, who are here today, have studied Bahasa Indonesia. Australia will provide 10 Recover Together, Recover Stronger scholarships for Indonesians to complete Masters or PhDs in Australia. Recipients will study in fields matching Indonesia's G20 priorities: global health architecture, sustainable energy transition and digital transformation. Bapak President, I also welcomed our discussion on regional and global interests. Deepening engagement with Southeast Asia is a priority for my government. We will deliver an additional $470 million over 4 years for Australia's bilateral and regional overseas development assistance programs in Southeast Asia. We will appoint a dedicated, high-level roving regional envoy. We will also establish an Office of Southeast Asia in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade to ensure whole-of-government coordination of Australian efforts in the region. And we will deliver a comprehensive ASEAN economic strategy to 2040 to map current and future export and investment opportunities across key ASEAN markets. I reiterate today that ASEAN and ASEAN-led institutions are at the absolute centre of our vision for the Indo-Pacific. Australia supports the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific and its vision for a peaceful, prosperous and secure Indo-Pacific. This also means supporting Indonesia's leadership in the region, including your ASEAN chair year next year. I welcomed our recommitment to Australia-Indonesia MOU on trilateral cooperation with the Pacific, a framework for both of our countries to support the needs of our Pacific neighbours, and our MOU on agricultural cooperation, supporting our mutual efforts to tackle food security challenges at a time of reduced global food supply and increasing prices that we are all dealing with. To finish, can I say, Mr. President, that I was pleased we recognised our significant defence and security relationship and all this does to support regional security and stability. Our work together continues to grow in scale and in sophistication. I look forward, Bapak President, to hosting you in Australia for our next annual Leaders' Meeting. When that day comes, I hope I can make you feel as welcome as I have felt here today, although I can't promise a bike ride around Lake Burley Griffin, but we'll see how we go. Until we meet again, Sampai Ketemu lagi.
Thank you. Well, we just heard the joint press statement between the Republic of Indonesia and Australia. We would like to invite the President of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Mr. Joko Widodo, and the Prime Minister of Australia, the Honourable Anthony Albanese, to a holding room before we are having official banquet at Garuda Room. Thank you.
And that was the press conference.
Yes. I was clapping my hands.
Same here. It's great to see the relationship that the two have between them. Obviously, this is not the first time they have met. President Joko, we highlighted that they have met back in 2020. It was mentioned by Pak Reza earlier, where it was Prime Minister Albanese, then head of the opposition, had made certain commitments to President Jokowi as well. Some of the things that President Jokowi mentioned, which was also mentioned by Prime Minister Albanese, was very important, and a lot of it that we highlighted earlier in regards to bilateral relations, in regarding to recovering economically together. Access for Indonesian exports for the automotive industry, that is something that is a point of note as well. The thing that you mentioned a lot, the comprehensive agreement, was also touched upon by President Jokowi. The increasing of working and holiday visas for Indonesian workers as well to Indonesia to be increased to 5,000 by 5,000 per year. The opening of the Monash University, whom we spoke with Andrew McIntyre, the president of, right here in Indonesia, and there would be an opening of clinics and hospitals over the next 20 years across Indonesia as well. And the last few points, the food industry, the energy sector, and the climate change partnership, with both parties mentioning the commitment of a $200 million investment.
Yeah, and I think from an Indonesian perspective, we're all waiting for the elephant in the room. Will the Prime Minister Albanese attend G20 or not? And he has finally given the confirmation, and I quote, "I will attend G20 because," he says, "when I summarize, the work is critical to the global economy. It is bigger." I think it's great. For me, it was such a relief to find out that his perspective is a lot more humble than the previous government in regards to the stance and where Australia is standing in the world and supporting Indonesia, particularly in this G20 presidency. This is what we have been waiting for, and it's great to see that he's reinstated his commitment and also supporting Indonesia's presidency and making sure that the summit is just beyond what the geopolitical matters is about. A lot of countries are dependent on the summit. As we have also mentioned before, we've been talking about this for 2 hours. We've been waiting for this Australian perspective. And also, he's looking forward to revitalizing the trade investment priority, including actually starting a lot of new initiatives, including revitalizing the trade investment priority, which is the IA-SEPA that we've mentioned before. And he just somewhat mentioned the detail on how he is going to implement it on his side. He said that the economic ministers will meet regularly and making sure that both countries will regularly check up on how policy-wise is it implemented perfectly or is it going smoothly. And he's also mentioned the Australian super funds, right, to explore more and further investments in Indonesia, more opportunities there. And I think this is something that the Indo-Pacific, specifically the Pacific region, has been waiting for, is the stand on climate change, because I think this is the first time, the first opportunity where Prime Minister Albanese had the opportunity to really address the public about their stance and mood and sentiment on the climate change issue, and them making sure that the accessible, sustainable energy in the region is also met with the 200 million Australian US dollar infrastructure investment, and also. For me, one of the biggest things is that we also talked about language a lot, right?
Yeah, education
and language. And he has also specifically stated that there will be funds for Indonesian language learning in Australia. He even mentioned that some of his cabinet members have learned Indonesian, and because of its, he realizes the decline and realizes the importance of rebuilding that particular knowledge. And I think there's just a lot that he mentioned about the G20, the ASEAN initiative, right? The $470 million US dollars for Australia bilateral and regional assistance. There's also the MOU for the trilateral cooperation of the Pacific that's already happening. And of course, last but not least, very, very important was to highlight and to mention the defense and security to support the ASEAN's vision for regional peace and security. I think that was just, those statements are the answer to all of our questions that were discussed in our talk shows.
And a bonus as well, if I can add the 10 scholarships that will be given to 10 Indonesians for the recover better in the to be had in Australia as well. That was going to be something that is a great benefit for those that are going to study in Australia, and security in the region, very important at these tough times, and very interesting that he ended the conversation or the speech by saying, may not be able to promise you a bike ride. Yeah, I'd love to go for a bike ride in Australia.
I don't know, Canberra is actually a very peaceful and quiet city. So.
And I'm sure the President Joko Widodo would love to go for a bike ride in Australia. Anyway, that just about wraps it up to see today's live event. It has been the official visit of Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese to Indonesia. There's still plenty more to come for the agenda today, including a visit to Raffles later on as well as another meeting. But in the meantime, I'm Paul Palelli signing off for now.
Yes, and I'm Kai Surya. Thank you for watching, and we'll be right back at See Today Update at 3 p.m. Make sure to stay tuned with us on See Today.